started, we have a great guest speaker today, Mr. Mac Taylor. We're happy to have him. First, we're going to go through, as we always do, our quote of the day. So this is from Trey Gowdy. Quote, "It always matters whether or not you can trust your government." I think, in the way that Trey Gowdy acted when he was in Congress, he definitely lives up to this mantra. And Trey Gowdy has actually endorsed one of Mr. Taylor's books. So that's just a fun fact for today.
Which we have copies of here today.
Yes, we do have copies, as we mentioned before. So I'll just introduce our speaker, and then we'll get along with it. So Mr. Mac Taylor is a native South Carolinian, where he currently resides. He holds a BA in philosophy from Furman University in South Carolina. And when he's not writing, he can usually be found on a boat somewhere on the coast of Carolina, which is a great place to be. So everybody, please welcome Mr. Mac Taylor.
Thanks, guys. Thank you very much for that introduction. And I'm excited to be here at Clemson, and I thank all of you members of the Clemson YAF for having me here to speak tonight. I am greatly appreciative of that. I want to make a point of clarification first before I start. When I speak of the left or leftist, I'm speaking about those progressive individuals who seek to use government to force their ideological will upon others. I'm not talking about or speaking about liberal friends that you or I may have that may vote left, but they seek to live in freedom just as we do. So I just wanted to make that distinction because I speak of leftists throughout, and I'm not castigating the complete entire liberal sector of our country. I have many friends on the left who don't agree with me ideologically, but yet they want to live in freedom as well. So, what was the single greatest ideological contribution ever made to human governance? Who made it, and how did it come about? It was an idea so revolutionary and so powerful that men, women, and children would set sail and attempt to flee in pursuit of it, while under the threat of death by the tyranny of authoritarian kings, queens, dictators, and tyrants, and a PC spy culture of citizen reporters who would report dissidents of conscience who attempted to flee the authorities of the state or crown for a reward. And this radical new idea, as this radical new idea burned forward through the pages of history, other men would eventually rise up to establish this radical new idea by codifying it into a written Declaration of Independence. A Declaration of Independence that these men would personally sign by pen or by deed under certain penalty of death if they were captured or if they, in the end, had failed. In 1776, Founding Father Alexander Hamilton, he signed it. He was 21 years old. Founding Father Peter Salem signed it. He was 16 years old. He was a black man, a former slave, and a Revolutionary War patriot. Founding Father Edward Rutledge signed it. He was 26 years old. Founding Father Benjamin Rush signed it. He was an old man of 30 years old. Founding Father Thomas Jefferson signed it, and he was 33 years old. Consider the courage that it took to sign by pen or deed a document that was essentially signing your own death warrant. So strong was the bravery of our founding youth. Yet these men, other men, would set sail and risk their lives to conquer, capture, and kill these liberty-seeking dissidents of conscience. This Declaration of Independence was twofold, yet only one fold is ever much talked about, taught in our schools, and celebrated. The taught and celebrated act is the Declaration of Independence of America from England. But it was much more radical, more revolutionary, and of a more profound importance than this. It was a declaration of a people who refused to live under the rule of man ruling man. A declaration that would wisely imbue that no man is the king of the other. That the only just government is a government by consent of the people only. This was the declaration of the sovereign individual from government. This idea of the sovereign individual was the revolutionary act and government sea change that America, through her own shed blood, would give to her posterity and to the world. And her experience would become an example for the world to follow. This new idea and example of self-rule that established for the first time in human history that man is the head of his government and government is not the head of man. That headmaster role would be reserved for nature's God and nature's moral laws. In 1776, Thomas Paine put it this way: "But where say some is the king in America?" He said, "I'll tell you, friend, he reigns above, and let a crown be placed thereon, by which the world may know that so far as we care for monarchy here in America, the law is king." And he was speaking about the law, American law, our Constitution, based on Judeo-Christian scriptures. America, with this single idea that was several thousand years of bloody human history in the making, had removed the head of humanity from under the chopping block of tyranny. The tyranny of those self-appointed authoritarian personality types who arrogantly assume some special self-appointed right to rule over others. Know this, that this idea of the sovereign individual was born of and backed by the Judeo-Christian scriptures. That no man is the king of the other is a Christian idea. That being made in the image of God means that you are divinely special, and therefore you are sovereign. That no man has the right to use government or power to control you without your consent. That all men are free and equal sovereign individuals. Rights belong to each man individually, and rights come from God, not the state. Know this because we know this because our founding fathers said these truths of natural law are self-evident. It is self-evident that we should not steal from one another. Therefore, it is morally self-evident that one group of citizens shall not vote or steal by voting themselves money that was earned by other citizens, including the 1%. Socialism is immoral and unjust. The system, by its nature, breeds dissent between the citizens. Socialism is a system that appears superficially virtuous to the ill-informed, but it runs contrary to human nature, and it crushes the spirit of the sovereign individual. The immoral and deceptive virtue signaling and false benevolence of socialism is explained further in the book. It is critical to understand that this Judeo-Christian idea of the sovereign individual extends to all men, whether Christian or not. It is under this umbrella of protection of the Christian idea of God-given sovereign individual freedom that the atheist, pagan, agnostic, Christian, whatever lifestyle, sexual or otherwise, is free to exercise his or her own individual sovereign right of conscience. The right of conscience is under the purview of the individual and his maker. This is why the idea of God is the critical component to the idea of individual freedom. The two go together. It was the Christians who brought this idea to the world stage. And ironically, this is what the atheist Friedrich Nietzsche was talking about in the late 1800s when he warned that when he infamously declared that God is dead and we have killed him. Nietzsche was warning that with the rise of atheism and Darwinian ideas of godless evolution, man has killed his transcendental moral framework. That selfish nihilism will follow, and because of it, men will kill one another in numbers never before seen. Nietzsche was proven right. And the 20th century followed with the non-war deaths of an untold 100 million people by socialist, collectivist, God is dead, so man rules man government structure based and designed on Marxist ideology. You know their names: Stalin, Lenin, Mao, Hitler, Pol Pot, and there are others. It is self-evident that we live in a rational universe that has eternal laws that govern it. The eternal laws of science, which cannot be seen but are shown to exist within the ether of our universe, are the very framework and structure that our great engineers and our scientists painstakingly study and discover through years of purposeful concentration in order to advance human technology and to make better the lives of all the people. Man is free to utilize the eternal laws of science, but man has no power to add to or subtract from these eternal laws. They exist independent from man, and this is self-evident. Who made and established the laws of science? We would all do well to spend time pondering this question. With proper and accurate application of these principles of science, mankind benefits from the inventions these eternal laws allow us to make. With the unintentional or accidental, improper, and inaccurate application of these laws, our products fail. and sometimes terrible consequences and tragedies ensue, as in the recent crashes of the Boeing 737 MAX. Men must accurately and strictly abide by the eternal laws of science in order to avoid tragedy and failure. Mankind is beholden to these eternal laws of nature, and he is not in control of their existence. Moreover, the more our scientists learn of our universe, the more intricate, detailed, and complex the systems of mathematical and scientific principles or laws that control it seem to be. The more we dig into the scientific structure of our universe, the deeper the rabbit hole gets. Our founders recognized this and acknowledged that we live in a rational universe, and that is the basis for the claim we find these truths to be self-evident. That all men are created equal, that all men are endowed with certain inalienable rights. As John Locke had described and our founders recognized, the eternal natural moral laws also exist within the ether of our universe, along with the laws of science. Moreover, the moral law is the only natural law that is innate to man. Think about that. It is not culturally determined as the left would have us to believe. Our inner sense of right and wrong, good and evil, is innate. It is how man is morally connected to one another and how he understands the natural moral law through his own conscience. Man is a morally connected and integral part of his universe and his society. Our behavior affects each other for good or for ill. Mankind has a role to play in this great drama of life. I believe, and it is much more than meets the materialist's eye. I find this to be profoundly interesting why this is so. And why didn't God make calculus or physics innate instead? It seems to be a silly point, but it's actually serious. With an innate natural law, all men innately understand the basic rules of right, of wrong, of justice and injustice, and of good and evil. With this innate gift of a God-given common understanding of the basics of right and wrong, of good and evil between men, our founders were able to build a man-made, just government based on the consent of the governed. This innate moral knowledge is a profound curiosity, is it not? And without it, we could not build a just government structure. Spend time thinking of that as you go through life. With this understanding of the moral laws of nature, our founders created America. It is from these fundamental and self-evident truths that your and my sovereign individual freedom has its basis. Moreover, that the very foundation of the West is based. These ideas of liberty are and have been under assault for more than a century now. The consequences of the progressive humanist assaults against our freedom and our founding ideas are now beginning to show obvious, grave, and possibly fatal assaults against our foundational principles as the left continues to grow its army of emotional snowflake demagogues in order to spread its false version of America, in order to bring America down and to remake it into their own politically correct utopian image. They reject God's natural moral law, and they seek to replace it with their man-made, politically correct laws and social justice. The left wants control of the moral law. This will be a reign of terror of men if they continue to succeed. The fundamental transformation of America is well underway, and it is in its final stages of assault. Jordan B. Peterson, professor of psychology at the University of Toronto and an expert on cultural Marxism or postmodernism. He recently stated that, quote, postmodernism, culture, completely rejects the structure of Western civilization, and I mean completely, end quote. Quote, it is not an option to understand this. It is absolutely crucial to understand this. Hey, hey, ho, ho, Western Civ has got to go. You guys may not remember that chant. I think it started back in the 70s, but I remember it very well. This has been going on a long time. David Horowitz, a self-described 60s Marxist radical, now staunch conservative, recently said, we are in the middle of a constitutional crisis, the likes of which we have not seen since the Civil War. The political left rejects, quote, the political left rejects the framework of our Constitution and is now in control of the Democrat Party, end quote. He also said, quote, there is no exit from this war. You are either going to fight for America and its ideals, or you are going to surrender to the leftists, end quote. If we lose these American revolutionary ideas, we lose individual sovereignty, we lose the West, and we lose America. The left wants you to believe that there are no absolute truths, that there exists no moral law, that everything is relative, that your faith in God is an emotional response to what you cannot explain by empirical evidence. While at the same time, the left hopes that you don't figure out that they have no empirical evidence for their belief in secular humanist materialism or their godless atheist worldview. There is more evidence for a rational belief in a rational universe with abundant and obvious evidence of irrational design than there is for an irrational belief in a godless universe with no conscious mind to create it. So it is they who have the emotional argument, because faith is a logical choice. That is the title of the last chapter in the book. If you get a copy, I hope that you will read that. If I were to attempt to tell you that our smartphones and our computers or any other invention of man self-manufactured or evolved on their own, you would laugh me out of the room because you know that this idea would be irrational. Yet when the left proclaims a godless, self-manufactured universe that is a billion times more complex, exists and evolves on its own, people blindly follow. The left wants control of the moral laws. This is why they hate the idea of God and a God-created natural law universe. And this is why they hate the Judeo-Christian founding principles of the West, especially Christian-founded America with its idea of the sovereign individual. The founding of America is logical, it is rational, and it is built upon the eternal truths which are logical and rational. And that, again, includes the logic and rational position of our belief in God. The left knows this, so they concoct very cunning arguments to assault the founding principles of America. Listen to the warning of our first president, George Washington. This is from his farewell address. Our first president, George Washington, in his farewell address on September the 17th, 1796, he prophetically warned that party faction will strive, and I quote, to become potent engines by which cunning, ambitious, and unprincipled men will be enabled to subvert the power of the people and to usurp for themselves the reins of government, destroying afterwards the very engines which have lifted them to unjust dominion, end quote. We are living the days of Washington's warning. Cunning, ambitious, and unprincipled men lie. The left is cunning, ambitious, and unprincipled. You cannot defeat a reasoned, rational, and truthful idea with reason and truth. So what does the left do to advance its fundamental transformation of America? The left lies about America. I will present to you the lie of the patriarchy. Consider this cunning lie with the true founding of America that I've just presented you with. The left says that the West, and especially America, is a patriarchy, an oppressive forced social order where white makes right, a white male-privileged forced social order ingeniously designed to keep white people on top. Is it not obvious that this leftist idea comes from a seed of resentment and perhaps hate? They present a deceitful, demagogue, and perverted version of our beautiful American history, just as George Washington warned. Then they fill many of the universities with cultural Marxist propaganda courses that they call critical theory, gender studies, social justice studies, whiteness studies, where they teach a hate-filled view of America, all of which are designed to undermine the founding principles of our great country and to grow an army of cultural Marxist emotional snowflakes to advance their Marxist assault on freedom. To save the supposed victims of the oppressive patriarchy, the left swoops in with their proclamation that they are here to support women through the feminist movement, to save the black people, the transsexuals, and to save all of us from the evils of the capitalist state. On women and the feminist movement. Have you ever heard of A.A. Sargent? Anyone? No one. He was born in 1827. He died in 1887. In 1878, A.A. Sargent, a white male Republican, a senator from California, introduced what would become the 19th Amendment, giving women the right to vote. It was blocked by the Democrat Party, who was in control. For the next 42 years, the Democrat Party would continue to block women's right to vote. In 1919, the Republicans won landslide victories and took control of the federal government and passed the right to vote for women. Democrats continued to obstruct the women's right to vote through the states. And finally, in the 1920s, the women's right to vote was ratified by the Republican Party. The left is about control and power. It is not about the advancement of women. The left continues to demagogue the women's movement and their lust for power. Just ask Fox News contributor Tammy Bruce, a gay woman, prior now president, and a prior national now board member. Tammy Bruce says the women's movement is a fraud where women are used to advance the left's lust for power on blacks in America. Our founding fathers, white males, passed a law ending the importation of slaves on March the 2nd, 1807. One of the great founders of America, a white male, President Thomas Jefferson, he signed it into law. And this is what he said to Congress, quote, "I congratulate you, fellow citizens, on the approach of the period at which you may interpose your authority constitutionally to withdraw the citizens of the United States from all further participation in those violations of human rights which have been so long contained in the unoffending inhabitants of Africa, and which the morality, the reputation, and the best interests of our country have long been eager to proscribe." Does that sound like the actions of an oppressive white patriarchy? The prominent white male Christian abolitionists of slavery were, two prominent members were, English parliamentarian Wilberforce and Christian evangelist John Wesley. Slavery was completely ended in America under a Republican president, and 630,000 lives were lost in a war that was said to be over it. Yet slavery continues to this day in Africa. And you never hear a word from the left on that issue. Dinesh D'Souza explains that no Republicans own slaves. He has an open challenge to anyone that can prove him wrong. So far, no takers. YouTube was just last week caught down-throttling a Prager University video of Black American female Candace Owens as she spoke truth to Congress. The left is about control and power, not about helping black people. The left continues to demagogue the issues involving black people and to use black people in their lust for power. The left is intolerant of conservative people who are gay, trans, black, Christian, or whatever. The left will support leftist gays, trans, and avowed Christians if they vote left and take a non-scriptural view of Christianity, just like avowed gay Christian Pete Buttigieg has just done in ridiculing our Christian Vice President Mike Pence. The progressive Marxists in America have been assaulting our country for more than a century now. They criticize America while throwing proverbial wrenches into the government by regulatory obstruction into the inner workings of America in order to then create evidence that she is flawed. They then use this manufactured evidence that they themselves created in order to criticize, to take down, and to transform America into a socialist, egalitarian state controlled by them. America is not an oppressive patriarchy. America was built of Christian values and ethics which are based on natural law established by nature's God. America is built on the self-evident principles of individual freedom, of truth, of the moral law, which makes her a meritocracy of competency. A meritocracy where each person is to be free to rise to his or her own individual level of competency, free from government interference. Anyone heard of Madam C.J. Walker? She was born in 1867. Female Black American entrepreneur and philanthropist. She was considered the first self-made female millionaire in America. She manufactured cosmetics for black women. In 1912, she said, quote, "I am a woman who came from the cotton fields of the South. From there, I was promoted to the washtub. From there, I was promoted to the cook kitchen. And from there, I promoted myself into the business of manufacturing hair goods and preparations. I have built my own factory on my own ground, end quote. Now we come to you guys, the youth. The left seeks to take full advantage of your youthful energy, desire to do good, your enthusiasm for life, and especially your limited life experience. The left preys on the limited life experience of the youth by presenting you with false narratives of our great country. I have lived long enough to watch the left go after the youth over and over and over again with twisted and false tales of the American white patriarchy in the apparent effort to persuade the youth that their America is bad Marxist view of the world. There is an old idiom that I traced its history back to the late 1800s. And it says, it's like taking candy from a baby, end quote. That's why I passed out some candy earlier to you guys. But now the meaning is not calling anyone a baby. It rather simply means that it's talking about something that's just easy to do, especially if one uses deception to do it. The left uses deception to dupe as many young people as possible to unknowingly trade in their individual sovereign freedom for a virtue-signaling false egalitarian state which they seek to create and to control. Each of you here today likely has the benefit of your physical youth and advantage over those of my generation. But I tell you this, that those of my generation likely have an advantage over you in life experience. Experience can only be gained through time and through living, and for most humans through the difficulties and struggles of life. You cannot speed this process along to help your young selves and your journey through life, but you can listen to people of generations more advanced than yours. You can choose to think critically and not emotionally, and you can understand that your education is in large part your responsibility. You can understand that a lie only works if one is ignorant of the truth. That being said, the snowflakes are in large part responsible for their being used by the elders of their same philosophical ilk, their own Marxist teachers. The left lies, and yes, it even lies to its own. It lies because it is not based upon truth and love of fellow man, not even the love of its own children, as the snowflakes prove. It is based upon a lust for power that will stop at nothing to achieve it. It is said that the pen is more mighty than the sword. Thus it follows, if bullets are like truth and the mind is like a gun, then I suggest that you turn yourselves into fully loaded automatic weapons of the true knowledge and history of our founding. Because you are and you will be facing the greatest ideological challenge and divide America has seen since her revolution in 1776. The ideological divide between the American Marxists and their global allies against the Christian founding principles of freedom of America. That is the great battle of our time. Antonio Gramsci, part of the Frankfurt School of Cultural Marxism. He said in 1915, he was a communist and he was a hater of America, and he hated Western culture. He said, quote, socialism, remember in 1950, over 100 years ago, quote, socialism is precisely the religion that must overwhelm Christianity. In the new order, socialism will triumph by first capturing the culture via infiltration of the schools, of their universities, of their churches, and the media, by transforming the consciousness of society. That is a perfect definition of cultural Marxism, and that is the enemy you all face. Now some quotes from the Communist Manifesto itself. This is from my book on page 167. Quote, communism abolishes eternal truths. Quote, it abolishes all religion and all morality, end quote. Communism, quote, abolishes the family. Quote, abolition of individuality and of freedom, and rightly so, end quote. My own daughter is about the same age as you all, so I have skin in this game too, so to speak. So you must learn, uphold, and defend the true Christian founding of America. God and freedom are inextricably bound. You lose one, you lose the other. And to do so, you should balance the trinity of the mind, the body, and the Christian spirit within you. You need to arm yourselves with truthful facts of history by the reading and study of good books. You need to keep your body in reasonably good shape so that it will help you on your journey. You need to develop your spirit so that you will be able to withstand the fiery darts of deception, which are at times impossible to see without it. And one quote from my book that I wish to leave you with. The cocktail of ignorance and apathy is freedom's enemy. It is the tyrant's dream and his posterity's nightmare. So always continue to grow in mind, body, and spirit, and to educate yourselves. And don't let them take your candy. Thank you very much.